and welcome back to the first new episode of What the Why after our brief hiatus due to our station relocation. We're super excited to be back, and if you haven't seen us before, our show features conversations with diverse leaders from all walks of life about why they do what they do and how they figured things out. Maybe you feel stuck and you want to get unstuck, or maybe you're just sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. All of our guests have something in common with you. At some point, they felt similarly about the direction of their life and they decided to do something about it. And today is definitely no exception. I'm super excited to welcome Noah Healy to our show via Zoom. Noah, although you're going to find out there's not a lot that Noah doesn't know. Noah is a market designer and game theorist working on better economic systems. After training in nuclear engineering, he worked for tech startups at the peak of the dot-com boom, and then becoming fascinated by the mathematics of information and computation that led to patent work on a better commodity market design. He wears several professional hats, like most multipreneurs. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Engineering Science and Nuclear Engineering from the University of Virginia. He's a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, and he's continuing the trend of brilliant mathematical minds that we've had as guests recently and will continue to have throughout the rest of our season, which I'm excited to say we literally have all our guests booked all the way through the end of second season. So we have a lot of things exciting coming for you. And today is one of them. So again, I'm very excited he's able to join us via Zoom. So without further ado, please welcome Noah to our show. So yay, get the round of applause. So hi, Noah, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Now, super excited to have you. So I mentioned that you've had some pivots along the way, but let's start with the early years. One of the questions for those who might be new to our show that we ask all of our guests is, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
Well, nothing really. I quite enjoyed childhood and was never in any particular hurry to leave it. So I didn't have much in the way of ambition. I just read and learned in school and played and explored as a child and sort of took whatever came in each new day, and that was it.
Okay, so how did you get from just being young and having fun and exploring and learning to nuclear engineering to where you are today? Because those are some major leaps.
Well, pretty much exactly that path. So devoting yourself to learning makes you kind of good at it. And so I wound up being part of several pilots that weren't formed for my benefit to accelerate mathematical instruction in my local school system. And that meant that I actually finished out the mathematical instruction of my local school system by my sophomore year in high school. And since I'm located in a town with the University of Virginia, that led to attending the University of Virginia for further mathematical instruction for the next 2 years or 4 semesters. That made going to UVA a very easy process because they would be effectively forced to accept their credits. Other colleges basically wanted to claim that things like differential equations was a high school credit class in spite of being taught by another university because it was during my high school days. So I wound up at UVA. I wound up in the engineering department, basically because I'm not much of a writer, and I figured I'd have to write less in the engineering department. It turns out that that was false. And so once there, you're supposed to declare a major at the end of your first term. Well, again, most people go into engineering with a very definite plan, not a I probably can get away with writing less here plan. But one of the advisors felt that I was a pretty bright guy and should basically get to do whatever I felt like doing, which might not have been the best thing for me, but still it happened. And so I started pursuing classes based on what looked interesting on the syllabus, found some instructors that were better than average and followed them around. And one of them was the undergraduate dean who was part of the nuclear engineering department. So I took a couple of his classes out of interest. One of those classes, he posed a problem, which I came up with a science fiction answer for, which then got him to introduce me to my thesis advisor. It turned out that my science fiction answer had some bare similarities to a science factual reactor design, and that he had a PhD student that was actually working on a computer program to simulate one of these reactor designs. And so I was able to get a research project, and this is why you have to write more as an engineer at UVA than as a not engineer, because you can get through the college. You can find classes that won't involve any writing at all, but to graduate as an engineer, you have to have a research project. And so I did a research project on sort of a survey of methods to extract mathematical models from computer models. And that was it. Then I needed a job getting out, and with the dot-com boom booming, jobs there were cheap and plentiful. So I wound up there, and once again, driven to learn. I learned not just the programming language that the company I was working for used, but also read the sort of supporting mathematical work on where that stuff came from, and that's what sparked my interest in computational mathematics and continued my career.
All right. Now, you don't just have an interest in computational mathematics. I mean, you have come up with new and unique ways to solve a number of different things. In addition to that, in more recent years, you've kind of started to deviate towards artificial intelligence, and you actually host your own podcast. So some of that, while you kind of figured it out during nuclear engineering, is definitely not nuclear engineering specific. You've kind of gone on a different road. So tell me about some of the things that you're doing now with computational mathematics. I mean, because some of this stuff is next level.
Well, my primary project are these things I call coordinated discovery markets. And the idea is to effectively reimagine and re-engineer economics as an information process system. So markets exist to negotiate and regulate the production and consumption of fixed and unvarying goods or services. And that allows large numbers of independent operators within an economy to make the amount of stuff or services that other people actually want to buy at prices that make their production profitable. And from that point of view, the markets are actually the sort of the first artificial intelligence technology that human beings have actually generated. Unfortunately, the kinds of AI that we're presently building and have been building for a few decades now and have been a part of the markets since the 80s actually cause that algorithm, the one that we run our pocketbooks off of, to degrade. And so there's a vital need to come up with markets that can withstand the financial insiders having greater and greater information access to be able to cut finer and finer deals against their counterparties, i.e. the rest of us and themselves. And so that's where I've developed a model that separates the sort of trade from negotiation aspects and treats each separately, allowing for much more intelligent and efficient markets, both algorithmically and economically, to come into place.
Let me ask you this question. So for those who, like, I understand some of this, and part of that is because I operate in this space, and part of this because I've had conversations with you. But for those who don't know what this means, right now, as it has been through time, people would negotiate in terms of trading. And when what you're doing actually improves that system.
Yeah, well, to grab a handful of examples, in the 1960s, something just over 60 cents of, say, the table dollar, if your mom put a roast beef on the dinner table, 60 cents of each dollar that she spent on that meat would wind up in the pockets of the ranchers that raised those cows. Today, it's a little under 40 cents. The frozen blueberry market, the so-called natural blueberries. This is a little under $500 million marketplace that is essentially concentrated in the American Northeast and the Canadian Southeast, and is largely something undertaken by people who are in sort of retirement or semi-retirement. Agricultural revolution means, with better seeds, better bushes, better management, and so on, have over the course of the last quarter century or so raised yields by 10x. But there's no independent market for those things. The large freezer owners essentially run that marketplace, and so there's basically an Excel spreadsheet that decides what the total value of all of those produced goods are. And over the last quarter century, with the total yields going up by a factor of 10, the total monetary value in real dollars has stayed the same. So it's a $400 million industry because it's a $400 million industry, because that's exactly how much is spent for the entire blueberry crop. And if you double the size of the blueberry crop, then you have the value of the individual blueberries. So these are sort of the examples of how our existing system allows people to really not let the market find its levels. And there's been a great deal of this, in particular, as I say, over the last 20 to 30 years, with other things becoming somewhat destabilized. A somewhat more topical example would be when Russia invaded the Ukraine. Wheat prices, Ukraine and Russia are two of the biggest wheat manufacturers on earth. Wheat prices spiked, and as a result of that, Canada and the United States, who are the two biggest wheat manufacturers on earth, didn't increase their cultivation by so much as an acre. And the reason they didn't do that is because, while the market prices spiked, those prices were not translated to the actual farmers. They were absorbed by the fiduciary middlemen. And so the sort of chaos in bread and flour prices over the last couple of years were effectively the result of the markets not actually connecting supply to demand.
Right. And let's continue this, because I recently just talked to someone who's a dairy farmer, and they encountered some similar issues in terms of actually not even being able to move product because of the supply, the way that it needed to be processed, and how much they actually had to dump, while milk was also skyrocketing because of the whole supply chain being disrupted. So, believe it or not,
there was a Canadian farmer that actually went viral with a milk dumping video.
Yeah, and I have one locally.
About 6 months ago.
Yeah, and Noelle, shout out to Noelle. Her family experienced that right in New Jersey. So it's actually time for our mid-show break. So please come back because we've got some even more interesting conversation around what Noah's doing next in terms of financial markets as well as his own podcasts. So come back after the break. More to come with What the Why with Barbara Ann. Welcome back to What the Why with Barbara Ann and today's very special guest. I'm just going to go on a limb and say mathematical and computations expert, Noah Healy. And right before the break, we were actually talking about how the markets traditionally have been driven through negotiation and should be able to process a certain way. And through mathematical computations and other things, he's really been part of changing. Literally, he's got a patent pending on changing the way markets operate in general. And before the break, I mentioned, shout out to Noel Poole again, who's a dairy farmer, and you were talking about wheat and how that was affected. But during the pandemic, so many other things were also affected, including dairy. Your grandfather started.
My grandfather was a lobbyist in D.C. and retired as the CEO of the Dairy Council, kind of just before the Got Milk era of ads, if anybody remembers those. And he was largely responsible for both getting a nationalized dairy market and not having dairy be a locally produced and locally sourced product, as well as funding for FDA computers that allowed sort of the modern dairy and cow industries breeding programs that have greatly increased the productivity of the beef industry.
Right. And so, the Great Food Drug Administration steps in, then we have a pandemic, and the supply chain can't support it. And in Noel's case and other farmers who have dairy, they ended up actually discarding product because they couldn't move it, and then because of regulations, they couldn't directly sell it. And so enter you and your mathematical genius in looking at new ways to approach marketplaces. And so let's talk about how, your mathematical genius is kind of pivoted in this way in terms of changing markets in general. To the extent that you can explain it in as close to layman's terms as possible, you have a number of things that you've done. You run multiple companies, and then you have a patent that's been on hold for a while. So tell us about that.
Well, I guess starting with the patent, the CDM system I mentioned is patent pending. The Patent Office has actually agreed to allow it to be patented twice, and in both cases, they have withdrawn their support for that agreement rather than carrying it off. For those who do not know, patents are sort of a two-stage process. You make an application and work with a sort of agent of the Patent Office, your patent examiner. This is what Einstein got his job. He was working as a patent clerk. The examiner decides whether or not your patent has merit, and when they do, they give you a notice of acceptance. Then you take that acceptance and the thing that the patent examiner said was accepted, and you send those in with a fee, and you get your patent. Mm-hmm. My examiner has said yes twice, and in both cases has been forced to take back his yes for reasons that he says that he disagrees with. And so it is now heading to, it's actually a panel, but what's colloquially known as patent court, to have a judge, an administrative judge, take a look at their arguments, which have no logical merit, and the people that my attorneys and I can speak to agree that it has no logical merit, or whatever will happen. I don't know. Yeah. That case is to be heard 2 summers from now, so in the summer of 2025. Mm-hmm. In terms of sort of the marketplace redesign, the basic idea is to recognize that there are multiple services being provided within a marketplace. It's not simply a case of somebody who has something and somebody else that needs that something. There's also the information of what value might be placed upon that thing, and the forum that allows trust to exist between the buyer, the seller, and the advisors. And so rather than having a sort of a two-player game, which is kind of a free-for-all of all against all, and sort of wherever the chips fall, then that's where they belong. My system envisions a structure of four interests: the market operator, who has open source, openly executed code that tells everybody they're being treated fairly, because you can see precisely how every decision was arrived at, and every decision is either arbitrary or personal. So you yourself make your own decisions, and all collective decisions are made through a provably random process. So there's no influence or anything like that. For the producer and consumer, that's very natural. People that make things or people that use things have very straightforward value propositions. But for the advisors, we can measure the content of information. That is what allows the digital revolution. We measure in electrons the bits on a screen that are communicating between us right now. And so I'm just using those techniques to measure price information, and using techniques from calculus to integrate those measures with one another to create a conglomerate or aggregated measure where the sum is sort of better than any of its parts, but each individual's contribution to that sum can be tracked and traced back to them. So as the collective advice of the marketplace is utilized, the market collects a fee for that service and distributes it to the contributors to that knowledge based on how much of that knowledge they contributed.
All right. So in my layman's understanding, one of my favorite phrases from a movie actually called The Social Network, we'll use that as an example, was, if you're not paying for a product, you are the product. But if I understand you correctly, we're the product, period. Because anybody who's purchasing or selling or marketing somehow fits into the equation, and each of our steps has some kind of value. And part of my understanding of what you're doing is you're being able to figure out how to measure all of those individual parts so that we can actually see what our value is in that process. Am I understanding this correctly?
That's not too bad. What I prefer,
what I
prefer is the notion that people shouldn't be products, and so whereas right now it is the case that the market essentially divides up not into buyers and sellers, but into so-called price takers and price makers. And the product of the marketplace, in a very real sense, is the price takers, the people whose job it is to make things or grow a product to make other things, and are not experts and devotees of the marketplace, and consequently have to effectively take the deals that are on offer. And so what my system does is that it actually recognizes the value of each of the separate things and provides a differential. So my kind of counter to if you're not paying, you are the product, is that if people don't sell their product, I will not buy it. So what this does is it creates a financial system in which every part of the system is being explicitly sold for its true value, which allows participation on a dignified basis.
Wow. So so if people aren't selling it, I'm not going to buy it. That's a really interesting thought process as you see, so much information flying around on social media about this is going to be monetized, that's going to be monetized, and wow. So as we're approaching time, there's a lot of young, brilliant people out there who have. I met one at a tournament recently who was able to calculate certain things. His mind started doing calculus at age 3. Like my last guest, Aiden, started doing calculus at age 3. What advice, as quickly as you can share it, do you have for people who do see things through mathematics or are raising young people who are seeing things through mathematics?
Take a look at computational math. It's all open. It's all easily accessible on the internet. Those guys invented the internet. And computers are the most powerful tool that humans have ever developed. And mathematics is the language that is necessary to speak to utilize them. So if you're one of those people or you're raising one of those people, hook them in and give them access to the most leverage they can acquire.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. What is the best way for people to connect with you if they would like to follow up more with you, as well as learn more about your podcast? If you want to give that a quick plug.
Absolutely. So please do follow our podcast. It's called The Fourth Age. It's on all the major platforms. Spotify, Apple, Google, some other ones as well. I host with a guy named Marty Weiner, who's, as you mentioned, the ex-CTO of Reddit. And it's 4 with the number 4, so THE4, THAGE. As for me, the most direct way to reach me is through my email, noahphealy@yahoo.com, or you can call out to me on LinkedIn. Just Noah Healy there will find me quite easily. If you'd like to learn more about Core Disk and you don't want to talk to me, or CDM rather, there's a website, Core Disk, COORDISC, which is also the name of my company. And you can read more there and find links to some video and the white paper. Yep, that's how to get up to me.
Awesome. All right. Thank you again, Noah, for joining us and sharing your unique and brilliant mind and your pending work as well as work that you've already achieved. So regarding upcoming guests, we have got so many to name. As I mentioned, we're booked all the way through March 2024. They include everything from coaches and business owners and technology experts to ice figure skaters and former skiers turned entrepreneurs. Please believe me when I say you really don't want to miss what any of our future guests have to say about their journeys. And if you missed any of our past guests and you want to check out what they have to say, you can catch all of Season 1 as well as Season 2 to date on demand on RVN Television's What the Why page on the RVN Television website as well as on Roku. You have so many viewing choices these days, so thank you very much for watching our show, and please tell a friend or colleague about us. As a reminder, What the Why airs on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time and 3:30 p.m. on Mondays Eastern Time, and again is available on demand at rvntelevision.com, Roku, and coming soon to other platforms. And also, please remember, whether you're looking to make changes in your life, no matter how big or small, please tune in for more interesting, fascinating, illuminating, mathematical genius and algorithm creating guests such as Noah, who decided that they wanted to do something with their life, something different with their life, and searched out what their core purpose was and lived it.